Good afternoon, everyone. So my name's John. I've spent the last 10 plus years working in the area of products and sort of 20 years in projects and delivery and e-commerce and digital doing that. As at the start of September, I joined an exciting new industry. Little did I know how exciting it was going to be in terms of OVO and energy, which has suddenly got a lot more attention there and excitement on, am I going to have a job by the time next week or not? But anyway, fingers crossed, I'm still gainfully employed. This is mainly going to be a little bit of a retrospective of some of my lessons I learned from when I was in financial services, and particularly HSBC and First Direct, where I looked after the digital product in some UK retail teams. So, hands up, anyone as an HSBC customer? Yeah, right, so you're about to see, and I apologise for some of my sins, and then, the latter 4 years looking after stuff with First Direct, where we're doing actually quite a lot of stuff. Quite glad Andy's gone now, actually, so I don't have to sort of, but I'm not going to talk about those bits particularly, but it's a bit more of a general. So, right, now, let's just see if I can master this. Okay. Now, bonus points for anyone who knows where this is. Now, this was not the Airbnb that I accidentally booked in terms of the staycation and turned out it was something else. But that's the workshop of James Watt. So, Watt was kind of like essentially took the prototype of the steam engine and converted it actually into something that was usable and actually generated power. Now, the connection we'd sort of here is he came in, I don't know if you saw this little picture of Matthew Murray on the outside of the wall, and you walk past Matthew Murray's workshops. Murray really took some of Watt's ideas, and they were sort of rivals at the time, but managed to industrialise them in terms of the manufacture of those and scale and make some higher quality sort of product. Both of those guys were problem solvers. And indeed, problem solvers to such a degree that Watt and his business partner, Matthew Bolton, came here, and I think the story is alleged in this pub, conducted user research with Matthew Murray employees to understand how he was manufacturing, in terms of what was he doing, what were the trade secrets, industrial espionage, you might call it now, but nonetheless, research there. So I think, a little bit of a nod to the past and sort of things in terms of, and as Andy was saying before, user research has been happening for as long as time and certainly continues to in this area of Leeds as well. Now, luckily, this has already been shown today, so it looks like a consistent sort of theme. Now, this is what's referred to as the double diamond. Whenever I search what is digital product sort of thing, this gets flashed up as an example. The reason why I like this, sort of example is it starts with the basic problem. Now, I think the example that the lady sort of shared this morning, that was the theme. But in terms of, it all starts with the problem. The whole process starts with the identification of what is the problem you're solving. And like any good student, I did some Googling after I talked to anyone around what am I going to talk about and digital products and things. And I came up with this definition, which I really quite liked around it. And digital product is a software-enabled product or services that offers some form of utility to a human. They attempt to solve a problem for a group of people trying to accomplish something. And I really like that definition because it mentioned problem solving. I realised that's why I'd kind of stayed in this sort of vague area for 20 years or so, because I really enjoy the problem solving aspect side of it. That's what's exciting. That's what keeps, that's what makes tomorrow a different challenge to today, because you're always trying to solve problems. They're subtly different ones each time. Sometimes, it's the same one, but the context changes. And that for me has sort of made my career really interesting, and why I continue sort of to look forward to it. And I'm looking for like a change in variation like that. Although I've just shifted industry, but I have to say a lot of the problems still the same. So with that in mind, and around the problem solving aspect, I'm going to talk around some of the problems that I've tried to solve through my career, and some of the sort of the lessons and the watch outs from that. So, first one. Now, any of you long-standing HSBC customers may have a flash of sort of recognition on this one. So, about 11 years ago, the cry was, we need an app in the banking industry, because, the iPhones had been launched, people were getting that, and this digital thing might actually stand up and be something. So, at the time, HSBC partnered with a third party to rapidly launch something called Fast Balance at the time, pretty Ron Seal marketing name there, did exactly what it said on the tin. It's actually built on top of the ATM rails, by the way, which is why it just gave you a little balance the last six transactions, which is the same as the ATM because it's going to the same point. You set up a pin to use it, lovely, worked really well, quick balance. Now, what we wanted to replace that with was actually a much more fully functional app in terms of you could make, move money around, see more than one account, see, more than just your current account, etc., etc. From a feature list sort of perspective, a far better product. And in fact, it was going to reuse your internet banking credentials as well. So it was something less for the customer to sort of remember. We went out, we tested it, everyone we tested it said, yeah, we love this, look, we can do more, reuses the same thing. Brilliant. So we launched it, and then, as per Andy's observations this morning, did people stop immediately using that same app? Did they come in their tens of thousands over to use the new one? No, they did not, because as per this morning's sort of call out, they know what they like and they like what they know. And that one worked really quickly and well, because what we'd realised actually people were using apps for was different to what they're using the stuff on the bigger screen for, in terms of, actually it was a bit of a paradigm shift in terms of people were now effectively snacking, in terms of it was quick, it was convenient, so they changed their behaviour and they did something more frequently. So what was essentially internet banking a once a week type task, mobile banking became practically a daily task. So people valued sort of different things in terms of the ease of access. And that meant actually getting people wrinkling their little fingers off this, that commercially that was costing us money every time we got it, offered inferior functionality. That became a real challenge. And the answer, unfortunately, to, well, how did you do that? So I should say now was, we made that experience worse. Right? We introduced blockers into the process. We put several banners in the way of when you logged that on to sort of say, hey, we've launched this new one. And it wouldn't go away for about 20 seconds. And we gradually upped the timing each time to consciously try and force people across. Now, obviously, that's maybe not something to be proud of, but it's when, to a point where banks, you couldn't go anywhere else at the time. If you wanted your account information, you had to come to here. So on one hand, we're abusing that position, and yes, you could have said, could you have made the other experience better? But in the organisational mechanics at the time, that was the easiest thing to do and the quickest thing to solve the problem that we have of how do you stop customers using this. So just a call out there. One, be careful around your research, because our UX for new app is outstanding. It did exactly what it said. However, we hadn't compared it in a side-by-side to the to the one that people were using. That would have given a different sort of result. So do no harm, make it no worse. Secondly, right, next paradigm. And just talking to Hamid before, he said, yeah, you used to have a really rubbish app, and then it came quite good, didn't it? Yes. It's a study of that one. So we need a better mousetrap, we need a better app. Became rapidly clear that we'd taken the old one as far as we could from a development, the tech it was based on, etc., etc. So there needed to be a better mousetrap there. Tech were very happy with that. They got to start building something that was globally consumable with loads of markets. From a local business perspective, that was maybe good news, maybe bad news, and there's a whole series of competing and differential incentives there around actually what does this product need to be, and what's this solution gonna look like. And one of the call outs from there is, where do the incentives lie? What are people trying to do in this? And the actual result of that isn't necessarily always customer focused, because the incentives and where the rewards lie internally within the organisation is judged very differently. And you've got the whole problem there of switching internally from an organisational aspect from something that's very project-based delivery, in terms of we've done that, we land this, we move on then, to more product focus, where actually it's about those ongoing iterations, it's about those cross-functional teams. And there's a real sort of cultural change in mindset to, right, we've done that internet thing, we don't need to touch it again, to actually this is a living, breathing thing that needs actually attention and ongoing work. There's also another little sort of anecdote here, and two of them around what you begin to sell and at what point, or just even features that you offer. So we launched this, we also put personal loans in. That was the first time we'd done loans on mobile phone. Now, there's a sort of saying in banking, it's really easy to lend £1 million. The hard bit is getting it back. So there's a whole load of regulation over enforceability and wording and general things toxic from a UX perspective of lots of screens and lots of text that you have to go through. But we managed to get legal sign-off, and for our journey we went through the user testing. And I always remember one of the users said, oh yeah, that's fine, but if it's for a bigger amount, I'd use the bigger screen. So, and that's the whole thing around context, settings, people's perspective. Now, 5 years on, that person might feel happier, so to speak, using a mobile phone to borrow 10 grand. At the time, sort of, well, how much would that be? Would it be 3,000? Would it be 5,000? Sort of thing. So, just to call out there around your testing, what people's personal journeys with this tech are in different places, and what they feel comfortable doing can be in very different places. It doesn't mean your product's necessarily bad or wrong. It just might mean they're not necessarily an early adopter, so to speak, in the piece. The other challenge as well is internally in any organisation with greater than one sort of customers, the solution to their problem, and Andrew alluded to it, is sort of like, oh, we need an app for that, or we need to put this in the app, which poses problems when you're trying to create a kind of sensible experience. That you don't get either too fragmented, or the breadth of it sort of spans so massive that you've got a monolith sort of thing that you can't construct with and can't iterate on. So one of the, if you like, the quick fixes for this has traditionally been, we'll build a separate app. Okay, right, which is great from a speed to market, it's simple, can focus on what you want. However, as we found out a number of times, that does have a kind of almost a natural sense of gravity, particularly if your core brand is known for something, that if you can't do that core something, so with banking it's essentially viewing accounts, moving money, if you can't do that in that other app, it's kind of like, well, why would I bother? And the reason, you can plaster as many buses with things as you want and spend as much on airtime, it reaches a certain sort of limit and then it begins to go off. So you have to think in terms of what's the purpose actually of spinning up this separate sort of thing. Is it just a test and learn to validate going in? Or if you're going to run it as a separate thing, then does it have enough momentum behind it to actually justify the money you're spending on it versus actually integrating it with the main thing. So, next classic, we need a faster horse. So, the problem with a lot of large organisations and even, to be honest, user research and customers is they like doing what they keep doing in terms of, and it's very hard often to see outside of that paradigm. And whole companies have fallen because of this, be it Kodak, be it Netflix, not Netflix, sorry, Blockbuster, etc., because their model works at the moment, and they're very happy with it, and they can see how maybe adding a bit of digital to it can speed up the process, but necessarily, does that actually solve the fundamental problem, in terms of the customer or the user has? So, classic example in banking's been, using your phone to take an image of a cheque. That's brilliant over COVID because no one wanted to go into a branch, cheques like radioactive paper sort of thing. No, they're not radioactive, sorry, in terms of toxicity, in terms of people wanting to touch them, etc. But if you think fundamentally around it, it's 2021 and we are writing bits of tree, handing it over to take an image of it, for those images to be exchanged at night between banks and then taken off to their own image things and separate it out. It's crackers. And you can, actually settle money within seconds between people. So that's a classic example of where a process has been digitized. It's electronic image now spreading. But was that the right thing to do, really, in terms of actually ease of settlement? Now, there's other questions around actually why are people still using cheques when there's faster sort of superior means of settlement and a whole line of sort of access to finance and other sort of set of questions. So often, it's a broader sort of societal challenge between, can we just get rid of cheques? Yeah, no. On this one, the other point I would sort of say around this is metric chasing. Now, mentioned OKRs, KPIs, etc., etc. Any good organisation or even good product manager sort of begins to develop a set of KPIs for monitoring their effectiveness of their product, or at least showing its usage. I would just pose the question in terms of, are you just measuring it because you can and linking your performance to that? So, for example, we measured digital engagement. So I think, well, what's the problem with that? But if you think about it, is necessarily someone using it 30 times rather than 4 times, is that a better show of actually usage or information? You know, in terms of if someone was previously just using internet banking 4 times a month and getting the same detail, why are they now accessing something 30 times? Is that necessarily a good thing? And are you just pursuing it because you can do, sort of thing, in terms of you're tracking it and not taking a step back to think, actually, is this actually solving the customer's problem? Is this actually a good success measure? Right, let's just go on. So, if I was a proper consultant, I'd have done a proper 4x4 matrix and I'd have done lots more colours for this, but as I was doing this on the train down to Bristol, you've got this slightly greyer version of this instead. So, when I started to think about problems and thinking about it for this presentation, I'd sort of divided this from my previous employer into sort of 4 broad categories. Problems your organisation has. These are legitimate, you know, commercial concerns in terms of whether or not staying in business, reducing cost to serve, etc. Problems customers have with your organisation. So these are things that you cause through your processes with your customers. So digital, it was always failed security. That was a notorious buggeration factor. Problems that customers have and your organisation can solve, that's what it's there for. So in banking, that's like pay a bill, look at a balance. But actually, you know, what is the problem that customers have? So that's very often not any of those ones further upstream. It's often a lot more fundamental. So not hitting a budget, you know, doing things, affording things, you know, going on holiday type things. So I'm trying to say on this is we often, you know, what is the problem you're trying to solve? Do we jump to something too far along on the right too quickly? When actually there might be more value sort of further along the chain. So example give is one thing I was working on before I left. It was around the reason why most people log on daily is to check their balance. Right? It's a highly predictable thing. You know, broadly speaking, 7:05 in the morning, that's about our busiest sort of time was on First Direct in terms of from the mobile log-ons. Pre-COVID, loads of people stood around commuting, dead time, it sort of filled in. But when you think about that from a service perspective, actually, we know that, we can predict that behaviour, you know, and shouldn't we be trying to do something a bit more proactive about it? In terms of, could we send you your balance 10 minutes before you normally look at it, you know, and then, you know, ticking that job off to be done and giving that reassurance. So it's more sort of a fundamental challenge over what are you actually doing and why. So, quick recap. Whose problem are you actually solving with some of the things that you're working on, you know, and being honest around that? Now, all of those ones I showed you on the graph, there's all value in that. Like, you know, the organisation needs to be commercial, but also from a customer perspective, you know, is it the pay the bill, or can you, you know, and there's value in that. There's value in the paying a check-in. But is there perhaps more value in something that's further up and answering a more fundamental need? You know, can you create a truly digital experience versus actually just digitising one because it's already there? And are you chasing essentially junk metrics? You know, in terms of, I would say, you know, the daily engagement score was essentially our sort of almost like junk food mechanism sort of thing. You know, it was a hollow engagement because it was under 30 seconds. Now, sort of as Andrew alluded to, you know, before retail banking essentially makes its money off lending. So, you know, the idea was, well, if you get people to log in regularly, one of those times they might want a personal loan. But, you know, customers are going to probably want a personal loan about once every 3 or 4 years. So if you marginalise that over if they're logging in daily over a month, sort of, you know, that's quite often they're not going to be wanting a personal loan sort of thing. So is that really a good thing? And do you actually have an opportunity to solve a problem further along the value chain? So just in terms of the problems that you've got, you know, it's that asking that 5 whys again around why and here. So just in conclusion then, so what's better than solving a problem yourself? Not having that problem at all. So if you think about it in terms of the example I gave around the log-ons and things, actually if we sent someone their balance, they wouldn't have to log on because they'd know it. If we paid the bill in the background because we knew that they were good for the money, they wouldn't have to log on to do it. Now, there's a whole, sort of tackling there of organisational both inertia and set of sort of beliefs that we need customers to log on. But, for me, when I was working at First Direct and sitting under a big banner that said Pioneer Amazing Service, actually what was better than doing it yourself would be not having to do the bloody thing at all, and there's a whole line of opportunities there, I think, to create greater loyalty and greater customer stickiness, actually, that sort of pushes against the traditional metrics of I log in a lot, but actually if you really value that service, if you really, you'll keep using it, but actually you value it because it's working for you in the background. And so there's a whole sort of, I'd say, challenge yourself on the way that you're thinking around solving problems in terms of actually can you take a more fundamental aspect to it and actually make your service or thing more sticky for the customer, actually, because they can't imagine having to go back and do it themselves. Dishwashers, for example. There you go. Right, so thank you very much, everyone.